The knock on George Foreman's hotel room door came at exactly 11:57 p.m. 3 sharp raps that cut through the humid Kinshasa night like a blade. Foreman, still awake and staring at the ceiling fan that barely moved the thick air, knew this wasn't room service. In 3 days, he would face Muhammad Ali in what the world was calling the rumble in the jungle, and unexpected midnight visitors meant only one thing: trouble. He opened the door to find Angelo Dundee, Ali's legendary trainer, standing in the dimly lit hallway of the Intercontinental Hotel. Dundee's usually confident demeanor seemed different tonight, almost nervous. His white shirt was damp with sweat, and his eyes darted down the corridor before meeting Foreman's surprised gaze. "George," Dundee said quietly, "we need to talk." Foreman's massive frame filled the doorway. At 25, he was the undefeated heavyweight champion of the world, a man who had demolished Joe Frazier and Ken Norton with terrifying ease. But something in Dundee's voice made him step aside and let the older man enter his room. If you're curious about what deal could change the course of boxing history, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because this story gets even more incredible. The room was sparse but comfortable, with 2 beds, a small table, and windows that looked out over the Congo River. Kinshasa's lights twinkled in the distance, but the city felt worlds away from the boxing rings of New York or Las Vegas. This was Africa, and everything here operated by different rules. Dundee walked to the window and stood there for a moment, his hands clasped behind his back. "You know, George, I've been in this business for 30 years. Trained some of the greatest fighters who ever lived, but I've never been in a situation quite like this." Foreman remained standing near the door, his arms crossed. "What kind of situation, Angelo?" "The kind where everyone thinks they know how a fight's going to end, but nobody really knows what's happening behind the scenes." Dundee turned around, his weathered face serious. "Muhammad's not the same fighter he was before his exile. 3.5 years out of the ring, George. That's a lifetime in boxing years. Then why are you here?" Foreman asked, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who had never lost a professional fight. Dundee smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. "Because Muhammad asked me to come. He wants to make you an offer." The words hung in the air like the humidity outside. Foreman had heard rumors about Ali's financial troubles, about the legal bills from his draft resistance case, about the money he'd lost during his forced retirement. But an offer from the man who called himself the greatest. What kind of offer? Dundee reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Muhammad knows he's the underdog. Hell, the whole world knows it. The betting odds are 8-1 against him. But he also knows something that nobody else does, which is that this fight isn't just about boxing. It's about legacy. It's about who gets remembered as the greatest heavyweight of all time." Dundee unfolded the paper slowly. "Muhammad's willing to split the purse differently than what's in the contracts. He's willing to give you 60% instead of the agreed 50-50 split." Foreman's eyebrows raised. The purse for this fight was already the largest in boxing history, $5 million guaranteed for each fighter. An extra 10% would mean an additional $500,000, more money than most people would see in a lifetime. In exchange for what? For you to carry him for 8 rounds. The words hit Foreman like a physical blow. Angelo Dundee, one of the most respected trainers in boxing, was asking him to fix a fight. Not to lose, but to make it look competitive, to give Ali a chance to find his rhythm and possibly pull off an upset. "You're asking me to throw the fight?" "No," Dundee said quickly. "I'm asking you to give Muhammad a fighting chance. 8 rounds, George. Let him show the world he still belongs in there with you. After that, if you can still knock him out, do it. But give him 8 rounds to prove he's not finished." Foreman walked to the other window, his mind racing. Outside, he could hear the sounds of Kinshasa at night, distant music, voices speaking in French and Lingala, the occasional car horn. This was supposed to be his moment of triumph, his chance to prove that he was the most dominant heavyweight in history. Ali was a relic from the past, a man whose time had passed, but Dundee's offer complicated everything. $500,000 was serious money, even for a heavyweight champion. And there was something else, something Dundee hadn't said, but that Foreman could sense: desperation. "Why would Muhammad make this offer?" Foreman asked, without turning around. "Because he needs this fight more than you do. You're young, undefeated, you'll have plenty more big paydays. But Muhammad, this might be his last chance at real money, at proving he's still relevant. The government took 3.5 years from him, George. 3.5 years when he should have been in his prime." Foreman turned back to face Dundee. "And if I say no? Then we fight straight up and may the best man win. But Muhammad wanted you to know that he respects you enough to be honest about what he's facing." The room fell silent, except for the labored whirring of the ceiling fan. Foreman studied Dundee's face, looking for any sign of deception, but the older man's expression remained steady and sincere. "How do I know this isn't some kind of psychological warfare? Some way to get in my head before the fight?" Dundee reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "Because Muhammad wrote you a letter. Read it, and you'll understand this isn't about games." Foreman took the envelope, noting that it was sealed and had his name written on it in Ali's distinctive handwriting. He tore it open and unfolded a single sheet of hotel stationery. "George," the letter began, "I know what the world thinks about our fight. They think you're going to destroy me, that I'm too old, too slow, too far removed from my prime. Maybe they're right, but I also know that you're a man of honor, and I'm hoping you'll understand what I'm about to ask. This fight means everything to me. Not just the money, though God knows I need it. It means the chance to prove that standing up for my beliefs didn't end my career. It means showing my daughters that their father didn't give up, even when the whole world was against him. I'm not asking you to lose. I'm asking you to give me a chance to show what I can still do. 8 rounds, George. Let me prove I belong in there with you, and then if you can finish me, you'll have earned it completely. I know this is unusual, and I know it puts you in a difficult position, but I also know that you understand what it means to be a fighter, to have everything on the line in that ring. Whatever you decide, I respect, but I wanted you to know that this old man still has some fight left in him, and I'm hoping you'll give me the chance to show it." Respectfully, Muhammad Ali Foreman read the letter twice, then looked up at Dundee. "This is really from him. I watched him write it 2 hours ago. He's been pacing his room all night, trying to decide whether to send me over here." Foreman folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like the humid African air. On one hand, this was his chance to cement his legacy as the most feared heavyweight in history. A quick, devastating knockout of Ali would prove that the old guard was finished, that a new era had begun. On the other hand, there was something compelling about Ali's honesty, about his willingness to admit vulnerability while still asking for a chance to compete. And the money was significant, enough to secure his family's future for generations. "I need time to think about this," Foreman said finally. Dundee nodded. "I understand, but I need an answer by tomorrow night. Muhammad needs to know how to prepare. And if I agree, how do I know you won't change the deal once we're in the ring? Because Muhammad's word is his bond. Always has been. He may talk a lot, but when he makes a promise, he keeps it." Dundee moved toward the door. "Think about it, George. This could be good for both of you. Muhammad gets his chance to show he's not finished, and you get to be the man who gave him that chance before proving you're the better fighter." After Dundee left, Foreman sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the letter in his hands. Outside, Kinshasa continued its nighttime rhythm, oblivious to the conversation that had just taken place. In 3 days, 50,000 people would pack the Stade du 20 Mai, and millions more would watch around the world. But right now, in this hotel room, the future of heavyweight boxing hung in the balance based on a decision that only George Foreman could make. The next morning brought the familiar chaos of fight week in Kinshasa. Foreman woke to the sound of crowds already gathering outside the hotel, chanting Ali's name with an enthusiasm that surprised him. He had expected to be the favorite here, the young champion representing the future of boxing. Instead, Ali had somehow captured the imagination of the Zairean people, who saw in him a symbol of resistance against oppression. Foreman made his way down to the hotel restaurant, where he found his trainer, Dick Sadler, already seated at a corner table with a cup of coffee and a plate of fruit. Sadler was a no-nonsense man who had guided Foreman's career from the beginning, and his weathered face showed the strain of preparing for the biggest fight in boxing. "Sleep well?" Sadler asked as Foreman sat down. "Well enough." Foreman ordered coffee from a waiter who seemed starstruck to be serving the heavyweight champion. "Dick, what do you know about Ali's financial situation?" Sadler's eyebrows raised. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. All this talk about comebacks and proving himself makes me wonder what's really driving him. From what I hear, he's in deep. The legal bills from fighting the draft, the money he lost during his exile, some bad investments. Word is, he needs this payday more than he's letting on." Sadler leaned forward. "Why? You having second thoughts about the fight?" "No second thoughts. Just trying to understand what I'm dealing with." But even as he said it, Foreman knew he wasn't being entirely honest. Dundee's visit had planted a seed of doubt, not about his ability to win, but about what winning would mean. Was there honor in destroying a man who was already down? Or was there more honor in giving him a chance to prove his worth before claiming victory? The morning training session took place at the Stade du 20 Mai, the same venue where they would fight in 2 days. The stadium was already buzzing with activity as workers put finishing touches on the ring and television crews tested their equipment. The African sun beat down mercilessly, and Foreman could feel the sweat beginning to form on his forehead before he even started warming up. As he went through his routine, hitting the heavy bag with the devastating power that had made him famous, Foreman noticed Ali's team setting up on the other side of the stadium. Even from a distance, he could see Ali moving with surprising fluidity, his famous shuffle still evident, despite the years away from the ring. "He looks good," Sadler observed, following Foreman's gaze. "He looks old," Foreman replied, but without conviction. After training, Foreman returned to his hotel room to find another envelope slipped under his door. This one contained a single photograph. Ali, with his 3 young daughters, all of them smiling at the camera. On the back, someone had written, "For Mariam, Jamila, and Hana." The message was clear without being explicit. This fight wasn't just about Ali's legacy, it was about his ability to provide for his family. Foreman studied the photograph for a long time, thinking about his own future children and what he would want someone to do if he were in Ali's position. That evening, Foreman found himself walking through the streets of Kinshasa, something his security team had advised against, but that he felt compelled to do. The city was alive with excitement about the fight, with vendors selling T-shirts bearing both fighters' images and street musicians incorporating their names into songs. But it was Ali's name that seemed to carry more weight. Everywhere Foreman went, he heard people talking about Muhammad, about how he had stood up to the American government, about how he represented something larger than boxing. It was humbling and frustrating at the same time. He stopped at a small cafe where an elderly man was holding court, telling stories about the great fighters he had seen over the years. When the man noticed Foreman, his eyes widened with recognition. "Champion!" the man said in accented English. "You are the strong one, the one who hits like thunder." "Thank you," Foreman replied, taking a seat at the man's table. "But Muhammad," the old man continued. "Muhammad is different. He fights with his heart, not just his hands. That is why the people love him." "Do you think he can win?" Foreman asked. The old man smiled. "In boxing, anything can happen. But win or lose, Muhammad has already won something more important. He has shown that a man can stand for what he believes, even when it costs him everything." As Foreman walked back to his hotel, the old man's words echoed in his mind. Maybe this fight was about more than just determining the better boxer. Maybe it was about what kind of man he wanted to be remembered as. Back in his room, Foreman sat down and wrote a letter of his own. "Muhammad, I received your letter and your trainer's visit. I've been thinking about what you asked, and I want you to know that I respect the honesty it took to make that request. I've decided to accept your offer, but with one condition. I want you to fight me with everything you have. Don't hold back because you think I'm doing you a favor. If you're going to get 8 rounds, you're going to have to earn every second of them. I believe you when you say this fight means everything to you. I hope you'll understand that it means everything to me too, just in a different way. See you in the ring, George." He sealed the letter and called down to the front desk, asking them to deliver it to Ali's room. Then he lay back on his bed and stared at the ceiling fan, wondering if he had just made the smartest or stupidest decision of his career. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment below, telling us what you think George should do. This story is about to take an incredible turn that will shock the boxing world forever. The morning of the fight dawned clear and hot, with the African sun already climbing high by 7 a.m. Foreman woke with a strange sense of calm, the kind that comes when a difficult decision has been made and there's no turning back. He had committed to giving Ali 8 rounds, but he had also committed to making those 8 rounds a real test. At breakfast, Sadler noticed the change in his fighter's demeanor. "You seem different today, more relaxed." "I know what I need to do," Foreman replied simply, "which is win the fight, but win it the right way." Sadler didn't press for details, but Foreman could see the curiosity in his trainer's eyes. The truth was, Foreman had spent most of the night thinking about the old man's words, about what it meant to be remembered not just as a great fighter, but as a great man. The weigh-in ceremony took place at noon, with both fighters looking impressive on the scales. Ali weighed in at 216.5 pounds, just half a pound heavier than he had been for his last fight before his exile. Foreman came in at 220, his usual fighting weight, his body looking like it had been carved from granite. But it was the stare down that captured everyone's attention. As the two men faced each other for the cameras, Ali began his usual psychological warfare, talking about how pretty he was, how fast he was, how Foreman was going to fall in 8 rounds. But there was something different in his eyes, a vulnerability that only Foreman could see. "You ready for this, George?" Ali whispered during a brief moment when the microphones couldn't pick up his words. "Are you?" Foreman whispered back. Ali smiled, and for just a second, the mask of bravado slipped away. "I guess we'll find out together." The hours between the weigh-in and the fight passed slowly. Foreman tried to rest, but his mind kept racing through different scenarios. How would he pace himself for 8 rounds? How would he make it look competitive without actually giving Ali a real chance to win? And what if Ali was better than expected? What if 8 rounds turned into a real fight? At 6 p.m., Foreman began his pre-fight routine. He ate a light meal, took a shower, and started getting his hands wrapped. Sadler worked in focused silence, applying the tape with the precision of a surgeon. This was the ritual they had performed before every fight, but tonight it felt different. "Dick," Foreman said as his trainer finished with the wraps, "whatever happens out there tonight, I want you to know that I'm fighting for the right reasons." Sadler looked up, his weathered face serious. "I've never doubted that, George. You're a good man, and good men find a way to do the right thing, even in difficult situations. At 8 p.m. they made the walk to the stadium. The streets of Kinshasa were packed with people, all of them trying to get a glimpse of the fighters. The energy was electric, unlike anything Foreman had experienced before. This wasn't just a boxing match, it was a cultural event, a moment when the eyes of the world were focused on Africa. Inside the stadium, 50,000 people were on their feet, chanting and singing. The noise was deafening, and Foreman could feel the vibrations through the concrete floor. Most of the crowd was clearly supporting Ali, but there were pockets of Foreman's supporters as well, creating a complex tapestry of sound and emotion. In the dressing room, Foreman went through his final preparations. He shadowboxed for a few minutes, loosening up his massive shoulders and practicing the combinations that had destroyed so many opponents. But tonight, those combinations would be measured, controlled, designed to test rather than destroy. At 10 p.m., it was time. Foreman walked down the aisle toward the ring, his red, white, and blue robe gleaming under the lights. The crowd's reaction was mixed, with cheers and boos creating a wall of sound that seemed to push against him. He climbed through the ropes and stood in his corner, looking across the ring at the empty corner where Ali would soon appear. When Ali made his entrance, the stadium erupted. The noise was so loud that Foreman could feel it in his chest, a physical force that seemed to lift the roof off the building. Ali danced down the aisle, his white robe flowing behind him, his face showing the confidence that had made him famous. But Foreman could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tightness around his eyes that betrayed his nervousness. As Ali climbed into the ring, he caught Foreman's eye and nodded slightly. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of their secret agreement. For the next hour, they would be partners in a carefully choreographed dance, one that would determine not just who won the fight, but how both men would be remembered. The referee, Zach Clayton, called both fighters to the center of the ring for final instructions. As he spoke about protecting themselves at all times and obeying his commands, Foreman and Ali stood inches apart, two giants of the sport preparing for battle. "May the best man win," Clayton said, sending them back to their corners. As Foreman waited for the opening bell, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. From the streets of Houston to the Olympic podium to the heavyweight championship of the world, every step had led to this night in Kinshasa. But now, for the first time in his career, winning wasn't the only thing that mattered. The bell rang and 50,000 people held their breath as George Foreman and Muhammad Ali moved toward each other in the center of the ring. The first round began exactly as everyone expected. Foreman came forward like a freight train, his massive frame cutting off the ring as Ali circled and jabbed. But those watching closely might have noticed something subtle. Foreman's punches, while still powerful, were landing on Ali's gloves and arms, rather than finding their mark with devastating precision. Ali, for his part, seemed surprised by his own mobility. The 3.5 years away from the ring had taken their toll, but muscle memory was proving stronger than time. His jab was sharp, his footwork fluid, and his confidence grew with each passing minute. "Stay on him, George," Sadler shouted from the corner, unaware of the arrangement his fighter had made. By the third round, something unexpected was happening. Ali wasn't just surviving, he was starting to find his rhythm. His combinations were getting longer, his movement more confident. The crowd sensed it too, their cheers growing louder with each Ali flurry. Foreman, meanwhile, was discovering that fighting at 70% was more difficult than he had anticipated. He had to make his punches look real while ensuring they didn't carry their full, devastating power. It was like trying to drive a race car in second gear, requiring a level of control he had never needed before. In the fourth round, Ali surprised everyone by implementing a strategy that would later be called the rope-a-dope. Instead of dancing around the ring, he began leaning against the ropes, covering up and letting Foreman punch himself out. It was a dangerous gamble, but one that played perfectly into their secret arrangement. "What's he doing?" Sadler asked during the break between rounds 4 and 5. "He's just standing there letting you hit him." "Maybe he's tired," Foreman replied, though he knew better. Ali was playing chess while everyone else thought they were watching checkers. By the 6th round, Foreman was genuinely tired. The African heat, combined with the effort of controlling his punches while making them look devastating, was taking its toll. Sweat poured down his face, and his breathing was becoming labored. Ali, meanwhile, seemed to be gaining energy from the crowd's support. "You okay?" Ali whispered during a clinch in the 7th round. "Are you?" Foreman whispered back, genuinely concerned. Some of his punches had landed harder than intended, and Ali's left eye was beginning to swell. "Never better," Ali replied, and Foreman could hear the truth in his voice. As the 8th round began, both fighters knew they were approaching the moment of truth. According to their agreement, this was when Foreman would be free to unleash his full power. But something had changed during those 7 rounds. Ali wasn't the same fighter who had entered the ring. He was sharper, more confident, more dangerous. Halfway through the 8th round, Ali caught Foreman with a straight right hand that snapped his head back. It was the hardest punch Foreman had taken all night, and it sent a clear message. The old Ali was still in there somewhere. Time to end this, Foreman thought, but as he loaded up for a devastating combination, something held him back. Maybe it was the look in Ali's eyes, or the sound of the crowd, or the memory of that photograph of Ali's daughters. Whatever it was, Foreman found himself unable to pull the trigger. The bell ended the 8th round, with both fighters still standing, both still dangerous. As they returned to their corners, Foreman caught Dundee's eye across the ring. The trainer's expression was unreadable, but Foreman thought he saw a slight nod of approval. "You're letting him back in this fight," Sadler said urgently as he worked on Foreman between rounds. "You need to put him away now, before he gets any more confident." Foreman nodded, but his heart wasn't in it. Something fundamental had changed during those 8 rounds. This was no longer about honoring an agreement or earning extra money. This had become a real fight, and Ali was proving that he deserved to be there. The 9th round saw Ali take more risks, coming forward and engaging Foreman in exchanges that would have been suicidal earlier in his career. But now, with his confidence restored and his timing sharp, he was making Foreman miss and countering with sharp combinations. In the 10th round, the unthinkable happened. Ali hurt Foreman with a left hook that came from nowhere, sending the champion stumbling backward. The crowd erupted, sensing that they might be witnessing one of the greatest upsets in sports history. Foreman, his head clearing from the punch, realized that their arrangement had become irrelevant. This was no longer about giving Ali a chance. This was about survival. The man across the ring from him wasn't a faded former champion looking for one last payday. This was Muhammad Ali, and he was fighting for his life. The 11th and 12th rounds were brutal affairs, with both men throwing everything they had. Foreman's power was still devastating when it landed, but Ali's speed and ring intelligence were neutralizing much of it. The crowd was on its feet for the entire 6 minutes, witnessing boxing at its highest level. As the final bell rang, both fighters embraced in the center of the ring. They had given everything they had, and both knew that something special had happened. The scorecards were close, but Foreman's early dominance had given him the edge. He won by unanimous decision, but it felt different from any victory he had ever achieved. In the post-fight interview, Ali was gracious in defeat, but defiant about his future. "I proved tonight that Muhammad Ali is not finished," he said, his face battered but his spirit intact. "George Foreman is a great champion, but this old man gave him all he could handle." Foreman, for his part, was unusually subdued in victory. "Muhammad Ali is the greatest fighter I've ever faced," he said. "He pushed me to my limits tonight, and I have nothing but respect for him." 3 months later, Foreman sat in his Houston home, reading the morning newspaper. The sports section carried a story about Ali's next fight, a bout against Joe Frazier that was already being called the fight of the century too. Ali's performance against Foreman had restored his credibility, and the boxing world was once again taking him seriously. The phone rang, interrupting Foreman's reading. It was Angelo Dundee. "George, I wanted to call and thank you," Dundee said without preamble. "For what?" "For giving Muhammad what he needed that night in Kinshasa. I know what you did, and I know it wasn't easy." Foreman was quiet for a moment. "Angelo, I need to tell you something. After the 8th round, I wasn't holding back anymore. Muhammad earned everything he got in those last 4 rounds. Dundee chuckled. "I know. I could see it in your eyes when you came out for the 9th. That's when I knew we had our fighter back. How is he?" "Better than he's been in years. That fight with you reminded him who he is, what he's capable of. He's training like a man possessed for the Frazier fight." After hanging up, Foreman walked out to his backyard, where he had set up a heavy bag under an old oak tree. As he began his workout, he thought about that night in Kinshasa and the decision that had changed both their lives. The extra money from Ali's offer had been nice, but it wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that he had helped a great fighter find himself again, and in doing so had discovered something about himself as well. 6 months later, Foreman watched on television as Ali defeated Joe Frazier in their rematch, then went on to reclaim the heavyweight championship by beating Foreman himself in their rematch. The man who had seemed finished in Kinshasa had become the most famous athlete in the world. Years later, when reporters asked Foreman about that first fight with Ali, he would always smile and give the same answer. "Muhammad Ali taught me that sometimes the greatest victory isn't about winning. Sometimes it's about giving someone else the chance to show what they're made of." The deal made in that Kinshasa hotel room had indeed changed boxing, but not in the way anyone expected. It had created one of the greatest rivalries in sports history, launched Ali's second career, and taught both men that true greatness isn't just about power or speed or technique. It's about character and the courage to do what's right, even when no one is watching. In the end, both fighters got what they needed from that night in Zaire. Ali got his confidence back and went on to become a global icon. Foreman got something more valuable: the knowledge that he was not just a great fighter, but a good man. And in the steamy heat of Kinshasa, under the African stars, 2 warriors had shown the world that sometimes the most important battles are fought not just with fists, but with heart. If this incredible story of honor, respect, and the true spirit of boxing moved you, smash that subscribe button and share this video with every boxing fan you know. These are the untold stories that shaped the sport we love, and there are so many more waiting to be discovered. What other boxing legends do you want to hear about? Drop your suggestions in the comments below and become part of our community that celebrates the greatest stories in sports history.